Duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now, we are the masters of our fate.
Howdy, gents. Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron podcast. I'm your host, Mike Yarbrough, founder and curator of wolfandiron.com, and I'm glad you're here. Man, I've got a fantastic episode for you. I know I say that every time, but that's because every single time I'm excited about the episode that we're getting ready to listen to, because I just got finished having the conversation with whoever it happens to be. And I'm going to be talking to Jessie Krieger. He's an entrepreneur guy. He's done some rock star stuff. We actually didn't get a chance to talk about that during the episode, but maybe we'll have him back on another time. He does a lot with book publishing, especially for entrepreneurs, and how to use those books to help elevate your business and to help get you, kind of get more sales and stuff like that, but also just to get your message out, to showcase you as an authority on the subject. And I know a lot of you guys have thoughts about, I want to write a book. I've got so many ideas. There's so many things I want to share, but I don't know really how to go about that process. Listen, even if you don't end up going with Jessie's team, you're going to get so much out of this podcast episode that it's going to be tremendously helpful for you to have this insight, whatever direction you choose to go in with writing your book. So I definitely want you to listen to this. Now, listen, if you're new to Wolf and Iron, if you just, maybe this is the first episode you've listened to and you're kind of wondering what Wolf and Iron is about, we're here to help men heed the high call that's on their lives. You've got this desire to be a better man tomorrow than you were today, and that you were yesterday, and than you were several years ago, right? You feel that pressure that's saying there's more to life than just the status quo that so many guys are living by. And I believe that's right. And so we come up with these podcast episodes, and we do articles, and we've got a great community online to help you guys grow in ways that you got to have a tribe to do, and you've got to have some knowledge, and you've got to have some men in your life that are going to help you do that. One of the best ways to get connected with Wolf and Iron is to head over to wolfandiron.com/the group. That's actually going to take you over to our Facebook group, and where you can request membership to become part of the Wolf and Iron community. We've got a free Facebook group out there, guys, some fantastic high caliber men having great conversations that are really going to build you up, and I look forward to seeing you guys over there. Now, without further ado, here's my guest today, Jessie Krieger. Jessie Krieger, thank you so much for being on the Wolf and Iron podcast. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you as well, Mike. I'm excited to be here and dive into this conversation with you.
So you and I actually have a mutual friend, and Cody Lanham, and some of the guys know that are following Wolf and Iron. I've kind of mentioned Cody. He's been actually at some of the different Order of Man meetups and different things like that, but he's been heavily involved in a lot of the things that Wolf and Iron is involved in, and over a number of years. He's actually come on as our producer now, and he was the guy who gave me your name, and you guys have a relationship that kind of goes good ways back. You guys were roommates or something along those lines, but it's just really cool to see how these things kind of tie together, and then also just for people to see, like, from really someone who's successful like yourself, just starting at sort of with where the same place everybody starts, or most people start, and really being able to make it to that next level of entrepreneurship, and even helping other entrepreneurs recognize their vision. Maybe it's in the form of books, maybe it's in the form of coaching and advice. But I just think that's just really cool that we have that connection there.
Yeah, definitely. The context there, your producer now, Cody, longtime friend of mine since 15 some years ago when I was getting started in my career overall, living in Nashville, Tennessee, and going to audio engineering school by day and producing other artists and recording our own music at night. That's the origin story with Cody. It also ties into my entrepreneurial origin story as well in some ways.
Yeah, Cody and I did a small little tour down in downtown Nashville several months back, and he was just talking about how he was big in the music scene there. And it is difficult sometimes to see people now and go, really, like, that was you? But at the same time, I was also a long-haired rock and roll guy back in my day as well. So times changes us a little bit, but there's always the little bit of the rock, the music guy that's still.
I always say, I've got shorter hair and looser fitting clothing now, but I still have the rock and roll spirit in my heart.
That's right. Amen. Amen to that. Yeah. Well, for the guys who are just hearing about you for the first time, give us an idea of what you do now and maybe how you got started with this.
Sure. For the last 5 years, my capacity has been the founder and publisher for Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press, which is a modern day book publishing company. And we call ourselves the publisher for the passionate. We really are focused on working with authors who have books on entrepreneurship, personal development and transformation, healthy lifestyles, spirituality, and some fiction as well. And, we, as a publishing company, we also provide just a full suite of author support services, really to help authors through the entire publishing life cycle, which takes a matter of many months. It can extend over a course of a year to really do a book, do it right, and get it out, distributed and available wherever books are sold. The way I got into that, Mike, was as I was coming towards the end of my 20s, I had founded or co-founded 4 or 5 different businesses. I got really interested in travel and culture and language and would spend 3 months or so a year traveling and living internationally and abroad. And for me, it seemed like I was really just following. I've always felt like I've followed an inner guidance and acted on my desires and passions in an entrepreneurial way.
Yeah.
I was getting a lot of people saying, how you do what you do, or what's your thought process around this, to the point where I ultimately decided to start writing. And that turned into my first book, Lifestyle Entrepreneur: Live Your Dreams, Ignite Your Passions, and Run Your Business from Anywhere in the World. So, ultimately, just to tie that together, 5 years now of running a book publishing company was preceded by 2.5 years of going through the author experience myself. I had an initial publisher based in Southeast Asia. In 2012, my book first came out there, and I was over doing book tours in Malaysia and Singapore and that part of the world. Subsequently, and became a best-selling author over there, which was exciting. Subsequently, got a second publishing deal in the U.S. and updated and re-released the book. And going through that whole process, I saw it from the inside out and saw what I perceived as a gap between what authors expect and hope and want from a publisher, and what publishers are, generally designed to deliver and provide and do. So to bridge that gap was a big part of my initial motivation to get into publishing, which happy to talk more about that.
Yeah, we definitely will talk more about that. I'm definitely interested in hearing about this. I know the guys who are listening are interested in hearing about this as well, about how that kind of publishing process goes. What are the things that we probably should expect? We'll get to that in just a little bit. I did want to ask you a little bit about your book, though, Lifestyle Entrepreneur, because I think that's an interesting phrase. We kind of live in this world of entrepreneur, everythingpreneur these days, and which I think is great. I think it's fantastic. It doesn't mean that just because you're an entrepreneur, you can actually hack it and you can do it. But I do think that that people that previously wouldn't have been able to wouldn't have been able to find success as an entrepreneur, like artists, for example. There's that, social media and just the state of things makes it so much easier to get involved and try your hand at it. But give us an idea. What does that mean when you say lifestyle entrepreneur? What's kind of the goal of the book there? What are we kind of getting at?
Absolutely. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, also known as Silicon Valley, and I had exposure to entrepreneurship from an early age, which in hindsight, I just am very thankful for. And, in that part of the country, there's different strands of entrepreneurship. There's being a tech entrepreneur, venture-backed entrepreneur, where you're, putting together a whole plan and projections and team and pitching for investment. So lifestyle entrepreneur is a different approach where we use the tools of entrepreneurship, but to achieve a lifestyle as well as a business that fits within those lifestyle preferences. And I go into a lot of detail and some exercises in the book on how do you tease out the ideal lifestyle and as I phrase it, the identity that you want to assume really in the process of starting a business and just consciously incorporating lifestyle goals. I say that because I think it's very common and natural in many ways for somebody to start a business and then it becomes an all-consuming endeavor. Yeah. Before you know it, you're working 10, 12 plus hours a day and the demands and responsibilities increase. It can be difficult to pump the brakes and evaluate if that's really the lifestyle you want when you're really passionate about getting a business off the ground. So I think the perspective that I've taken is getting clarity on how you want your life to look and unfold over the coming 12, 18 months, maybe up to a couple of years, and then tie that in with really the second half of the book is leveraging different aspects of entrepreneurship to get a business going that can be run virtually. Yeah. And to that extent, I feel fortunate that I kind of got ahead of an emerging trend with lifestyle entrepreneur. In 2011 and 12, it was the term was less utilized, let's say. And I didn't even come up with it. I think, honestly, Tim Ferriss may have been the first person to coin it in like 2007 or 8. Yeah. But I really decided to plant my flag there because I feel like it's the most representative way to describe my approach to business and life over now many years, decade and a half, in fact.
Well, I think it's a fantastic idea to write about because you're absolutely right. I mean, everybody who starts a business, not everybody, but a lot of guys who start a business, we kind of jump into it with both feet and we just think we're going to give it our all. And we don't really put a timeline on that. We kind of understand that there's going to be the initial, we just got to give it a big push, to get it off the ground. And there's going to be a lot of legwork and some late nights and that kind of stuff. But there's never really this mindset of like, when is this going to stop? I mean, we hear stuff like these mantras or stuff that's cliche now, like success never sleeps. And I always think, no, success really needs to sleep because if you're not sleeping, you're not very successful. You're just busy. And, that kind of stuff. And we don't think ahead far enough. And I think that the best entrepreneurs are the ones who kind of say, what am I trying to build here? Both for my business, but also for myself and for my family, for my legacy, for my lifestyle. And I think that's absolutely key. And you're absolutely right. So I can't wait to check out your book. I haven't read it.
Well, if I may, I'll expand on that concept a little where I think you nailed it, especially guys. Maybe this is true for women as well, but, for guys, there's this driven, purposeful approach that we can take to starting something new and giving our all. I think what I really try and emphasize in the book is by starting with a holistic view of what you want your life and really beyond your life, a day-to-day experience of being an entrepreneur to look like. And if you can visualize that at the front end, it takes a little creativity. But I think where people get tripped up is they see the opportunity, they have the motivation, they make a go at it. And without any other material aspect of their life pulling them away from the business, then it can quickly become an all-consuming endeavor. And, I know that firsthand as well. So I think a lot of the times, or if I observe many people I know who run businesses that have become very busy and very involved, even if they're financially successful, without having a clear vision on what else they would want to do with their time and what experiences they want to have, the default is just keep hustling and do something new within the business. And so I try to make that distinction and also embody that in my own life too.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely key. And even like with, so we've got, some of the guys know this who've been following Wolf and Iron for a while. We've got another business called Rustic in Maine, and it's just taken off like a shot. Started back in 2016. Last year in June, I quit my job as a software developer for 15 years. I quit that to come run this. We've now got a business of about 18 people and building, and we're just, sending rings out all over the world, and it's great. And one of the challenges that I've had just is to get my mind around the notion that I am in a place of not just building a business, which is sort of, you can kind of objectify the business, but I'm in a place of needing to delegate responsibility to other people. And that's oftentimes odd for people who are just starting their own business. Many of us have been in that worker kind of mindset for so long. And then we finally get to a place where we really need to start telling people what to do and how to do it and casting vision and trusting that they're going to accomplish things the right way. That becomes, it's a strange thing to put on, especially for us, because we work with so many of our friends and family and people we love that we've brought on into the business. And so even, coming and, to people that you've known for years and saying, hey, Joe, would you mind doing such and such a thing? That can also be a challenge, I think, for delegating those responsibilities that have got to be delegated, the tasks and roles that have got to be systematized, getting those off of your plate and onto somebody else's so that you can realize that vision of whatever your lifestyle, happens to, whatever you want for that lifestyle vision that you have.
Yeah, you said the magic word, which is delegation. And I think that's part and parcel with having a life and running a business. There's a certain hustle and a certain amount of effort that's more or less required on the front end of getting something going. But I think it's very important to get clear as soon as possible on what are the key roles in the company and what are the associated responsibilities and I guess you could look at it that way, that somebody would have who's executing on that role, and then making hiring and personnel and talent development a priority earlier than most people tend to, meaning there's a tendency, at least that I've observed, for people to just do it, right? Yeah. Because honestly, in the earlier stages, it is easier to just roll up your sleeves and do it than to say, okay, this is part of this process. And if somebody was doing this process as a core responsibility, then, they could handle X amount of work over a day or a week, and compartmentalizing that function maybe doesn't come as easily to people, or it's not necessarily intuitive. So, if you take something away from this call, if you have a business, you could really look at and track the time that you spend on the different functions involved in running your business, and just get your finger on the pulse of what you're actually doing. Is it mostly sales? Is it mostly fulfillment? Is it mostly another aspect of the business? Are you really involved in marketing, but you hate bookkeeping and accounting, but you spend a lot of time doing that because you have to?
Yep.
If you can tease out what the functions you're doing are that are desirable and enjoyable and drive the business forward versus things that have to be done and are outside of your core competency or area of expertise, it's a big part of achieving scale and being a business owner, which is a different hat to wear in addition to entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And the other two are, and other people have talked about this, but I think it's a useful framework, is investor and CEO. So if you just borrow this framework that I don't even know exactly who came up with it, but it feels important to share. The entrepreneur gets things going, is a hustler, has the big vision. An investor is looking at the financial flows. How do we make this company profitable? How do we show, a return on money and time invested? The business owner is saying, okay, who are the right people to be in these roles, and how do I develop talent and look at the company top down? And the CEO is the one in charge of executive decision making for an entity that already exists. So I think that's a helpful way to also look at a business.
Yeah.
After the very initial starting stages, to say, okay, well, which hat am I going to put on, and look at this business through that lens.
Yeah, it's really good because you do wear different hats, and you do have to kind of be able to transition from one mode to another a lot of times. When we get really busy with ring orders and stuff like that, or there's something going on with Wolf and Iron, since Wolf and Iron is still getting off the ground, there's a lot of hats that I wear that are just sort of like, legwork type of things that we have to do. But then you have to put on the other hat of, I own this business. I've got to, delegate. I've got the responsibility of leading. And as you're talking, I had another thought I thought I'd share. You've probably thought of this, but especially for the guys who are listening, Entrepreneurs we're kind of a different breed sometimes, and in most cases, I would say, in that we generally have a really strong desire for freedom and the ability to express our own ideas and to do our own thing. Hence, we go out and we start our own businesses and do whatever. A lot of people don't think that way. Most people, I would say, really desire strong leadership and clear vision. And so for the entrepreneurs out there, whether you're a seasoned business owner or you're just starting out, I would say just keep that in mind, that many of the people who come work for you, they're wired a bit differently than you. Not that that's bad. They're just different. And the skill sets the things that make you an entrepreneur is that you don't like to fall in line and do the same thing everybody else does, and you don't like to be told what to do a lot of times. Other people, they love having some freedom, but they like to have it within clear bounds and clear direction, and that's called leadership. And I think that we have a responsibility as entrepreneurs and as leaders of our businesses to give that as clearly as we can, while also respecting, the people's differing personalities, who needs a little more freedom, who needs a little more direction, those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's well said. I'll share something like within my company, Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press, there's a handful of people on our team doing, valuable work that I may not have personally interacted with.
Yeah.
And I think, it's a fact that we've grown and we have like a 10, sometimes 12 person team, but we have a core leadership team of 4, plus me, and then their sort of department heads. Mm-hmm. And part of putting the business owner hat on and the CEO hat is not involving myself in every aspect of everything that's going on.
Yeah.
So especially HR decisions too, in some cases, because I'm really not the best at that. Like my chief operating officer, Kristen, has been a godsend because she's a taskmaster. She's very good with like deadlines and project management related stuff. And if I were to be in there trying to move certain parts of book projects forward with people 1 or 2 steps down the org chart, then, I risk muddying the waters or usurping authority that I granted to people on my leadership team.
Yeah.
There's all these things that that become more relevant, a few years into the game than they do at the start. So that's another aspect of entrepreneurship with a vision to scale. We've doubled in size revenue-wise every year since we started, and sometimes that gets a wow. Sometimes I look at it and I just think this is what I want to be happening with the company, and I'm willing to subject myself to emotional extremes, uncomfortable situations, as well as receive and enjoy the celebratory moments of a book launch that hits number 1 or a big opportunity that comes along. I guess I just want to share it to whoever's listening that it's always a mixed bag.
Yeah.
And, even in the span of a day, I can go from exaltation to borderline depression and then back to middle ground before I go to sleep. And it's kind of par for the course.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. And and just as I was saying, not everybody's built for that. And that's not every business. Every business doesn't have those kinds of ups and downs. A lot of businesses are kind of, even keel. But there is that, especially if you're progressing fairly quickly and you're growing at a rapid pace, there are new challenges that come with every stage of growth. That's great. That's great feedback. And I just love that entrepreneur mindset there. So I can't wait to read the book. I want to jump into books and the authoring side of things, because there does seem to be this connection between the people who have started a business, they've done something successful, and there's a real strong desire to share that information, share that knowledge in their particular way. It may not even be new stuff, but a lot of times it's how they particularly communicate it. It's their story that's going to resonate with somebody else. They don't always have an audience necessarily that's if I take my I've got a Wolf and Iron audience that's probably primed for a book from Wolf and Iron or from me. But my rustic and Maine audience for the ring making, they're not really looking for me to write a book and sell it to them. Maybe they'd appreciate it. I don't know. But I imagine there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are in that place where they don't necessarily have an audience of readers, yet. How do you guys go through that process of kind of priming their audience for, this person's getting ready to release a book and you need to be about it?
Great question. I'll answer it first by saying there's really two different trajectories that somebody comes into working with us in a publishing perspective. One is an established business owner with an audience of some size and a platform, and they're busy, which is why they want publishing support. Okay. So we can take responsibility off their plate and move things forward that will leverage their business for further growth and tell their story and thereby create more personal connections with readers and hopefully turn them into customers. The other trajectory is somebody who's got the experience, sufficient to write a good book, but doesn't have the audience or doesn't operate in that capacity. What I mean by that is, as I was writing Lifestyle Entrepreneur, as it came out, I was conscious of the shift, whereas the previous businesses I had been in, it wasn't a personal brand. And in fact, on a few of them, I wasn't even on the website. It was a customer-focused, product-driven business, and I was in an operational role. When you do a book, you're stepping out as more of a public figure, a thought leader, an expert, if you will, and literally the person who wrote the book on it, right? So it's a different capacity to be speaking about something that you've done in a little different way than the way you speak about it and teach or talk about it and convey things from a more high level, top-down perspective. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
But so to answer your question now, in terms of audience development, there's a few good strategies. One of my favorites is a simple funnel whereby you're giving away a sample chapter of your book or some complementary resource. So, for example, for Lifestyle Entrepreneur, I've given away the first couple chapters as an incentive. I've also given away, some of the frameworks that are in there as sort of a workbook style resource.
Yeah.
So whatever your inducement is on the front end to have an easy way that anybody can go to a URL, access some of your content, and then that you communicate with them over the next week or so to fill in the blanks. So whatever they got from the sample chapters or the resource, to add context to that, maybe share a personal story of why you even started the business or wrote the book, maybe share a case study of somebody else who used the material you've written about to leverage their own success in different ways. And the idea there is that over a week to 10 days, somebody can come into your world, get to know you, be familiarized with you in a way that's optimal for your book and your positioning, and have the option to buy the book or learn more about your other products and services. And so that can be as easy as, a 3 to 5 email mini campaign.
Yeah.
And then with that in place, it's really about getting in front of new audiences. So doing podcasts or media to the greatest extent possible. But also there's some creative ways to target people, let's say, online based on interests and preferences. Just as an illustration of that, I did a prolonged advertising campaign for people in the U.S. that liked Tim Ferriss between ages 28 and 45. And the wording on the ad was, like Tim Ferriss, you'll love Lifestyle Entrepreneur. Click here to get the first 3 chapters plus a video training course on how to start a business you love. Something like that.
Yeah.
And, without getting super technological, just get the concept of online ads and things like Facebook and Google Display Network in its own way lets you share your message and get in front of, hopefully, the right people with the right message at the right place at the right time. And if you nail those, then you've got a new person tracking, following your work, engaging with your material.
So as you're talking about this, I'm hearing a couple of things. So the guys who are probably listening to this are thinking, I want to write a book so that I can sell my book and I become a famous author. Okay, that's one avenue. But what you're talking about is And I think it's actually far more success. The chances of success are much greater than being the one author that everybody has on the bookshelf. And that is using the book as a lead of types. So people like the book for the sake of the book. That's great, but also there's a lead into the greater and broader business offerings that you have going on, and then also it helps identify you as an authority on a subject. So now all of your thoughts, at least many of your thoughts on a particular subject, are down on paper, and people can read that and connect with you. And not only that, but as you said, you can pull pieces of that, a chapter here, a chapter there, some frameworks, some illustrations from your book, and that's reusable content that you can put out there over and over a period of time, really for years, and use those, even if they don't buy the book. Those are still lead-ins for people to kind of find out more about you and what you're doing, and maybe that just leads them to, your business, the other thing that you're really about, right? Assuming that you're not just an author for the sake of being an author. Would that be right?
Yeah, this is definitely teasing out the more nuanced value to doing a book. In my view, if you, and in my experience as well, if you set things up right, for every, let's say, 100 books you sell, or really for every 1,000 books that you sell, there's going to be some breakdown of numbers for the percentage of people that would be interested in doing more, learning more from you, working with you. And if you're intelligent in how you position the other offers, the availability of your products, services, or experiences, then the book can and should become your best business development tool. And that really works when you've got, obviously, the book done and out, but also when it's positioned in the right way, which, again, doesn't have to be over the top. We just talked about a simple little funnel setup that brought the first 2,000-3,000 people into my audience. So there's duplication available. And the benefit of a book as well is that, you don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to content. For marketing purposes, you could do a whole campaign where you tease out the main idea in each major chapter. And there's 10, 12, 15 topical pieces of content that you can push out in different ways, all pointing back to, if you learn something from this, click here to get a copy of the book. And then within the book, there's, I call them offer pages, where a dedicated page to each one of the main offers that you have, so that it's not intrusive, meaning the book content isn't a glorified sales letter. That should never be the case. But if somebody's reading and getting a good experience, they also have everything they need in front of them to advance that interest towards becoming a customer or client in some shape or form. If you get that, that's the holy grail, where, you could sell 1,000 books, which is better than 80% of the books that get published, but definitely not going to give you retirement money from book sales. But that could easily turn into $50,000, $100,000 of business with the right strategy in place around it.
Yeah, and I just love that. And I think that I'm going to tell you right now, you're rocking some people's world with this discussion, because they've probably seen some of these types of things happen. Somebody, hey, here, get my book for free, or get my book, pay shipping, whatever. Or even they've read a book and it's led them down the road to, here's what this author's about. Oh, but look, they've got this whole other world that they're, of business that they're involved in. And I think that really gives people motivation, entrepreneurs especially, a motivation to really put in the time and the effort to make that book not only the best it can be, but also to just get it done. Because that's one of the things that authors, I think, a lot of times hang up on, is like, I've got 100 other things to do, especially if you already own a business. When am I going to find time to write a book? What's the return going to be for me? We think about it in terms of a business. And when you think about, oh, wait, this book is an incredible, not only a way for me to get my ideas down on paper, maybe even help me refine what it is that I really think about, the things that I kind of do intrinsically, or maybe naturally if you've been doing it for a while. But also it's an incredible marketing tool. And I think that if you can, and I know you guys do, if people grab that concept, then
well, that's just to tie something in. When we were warming up in the green room here, we mentioned Sovereignty by Ryan Michler, And I'll never forget one of the first conversations that I had with him in person. What really stood out to him was when I said, look, a book gives you the opportunity to codify your approach to life, to business, to masculinity, what have you, in a way that anybody can pick it up and read it and truly know your perspective, your strategy, your background. And I just remember, having that conversation, and that really landed with him. It's easy to see that in a one-on-one, person-to-person conversation, but I hope it's also true that, if you're listening to this podcast, you also get the message that, you have the creative freedom with a book to truly define your statement and your value and contribution to the world in your own terms. And that's a powerful thing. Because once it's done, and look, let's be honest, it is an effort to write a book. Mm-hmm. It's not something like a podcast where we can sit down, knock it out, and then it's done, pending, editing and uploading. A book's not really something you can write in one sitting, nor should you try. But when it is done, it's done. Meaning, my book, Lifestyle Entrepreneur, came out over 5 years ago, and it's still out there working for me, right? It's still conveying everything I wanted to, and everything that it did when it came out, still just as true today.
I think it's a great point, and especially about Ryan. So Ryan Michler, for those of you, maybe if you're not familiar with Order of Man, you can go to orderofman.com. You can definitely see his book, Sovereignty, out there. I recommend getting that, checking it out. I talked to Ryan a little bit about the writing process, and he's just a beast. He's one of those guys that says, I'm going to write 1,000 words a day, and no matter what, I'm going to do it, right? And he just sits down and knocks it out, and he gets it done. Everybody doesn't work the same way in terms of goal setting and just making that progression through, a list of, towards a longer goal, like writing a book, finishing a book. Do you have any advice for us on maybe it's goals related to writing a book, maybe it's goals just in general, but just how do we get that? How do we get stuff that's a great concept? How do we get that to done?
Yeah, there's, and you may notice a theme here. I usually have two different approaches to these types of questions, right? Okay. And the same is true with the writing process. And you should pick the one that resonates with you. So one approach is bottoms up, which is just starting to write on whatever it is that feels up for you. And as you're writing sections or chapters, the order and the structure will start to appear. And then you can organize and put everything together and put the finishing touches. Then the opposite of that would be a top-down approach, which is starting with the outline, starting with the main topics and the flow that you want the book to have, the story arc, I call it as well. Like, what's the experience somebody has from when they open up the first page to when they finish the last page and close the book? What's changed? What's transformed in them? What new perspectives have you imparted? If you look at it that way, top down, then you can create an outline, and then with each chapter, you could even story map, meaning having a format for each chapter where you either open up with a story and then you've got maybe 8-10 pages of content, and then an action step for the reader, something like that, giving yourself a book outline and then a chapter outline. And then it just gets down to scheduling the time to write the content and drop it in. So whether it's bottoms up or top down, the common thread there is actually writing and creating. I feel like one of the obstacles that prevents a lot of well-intentioned people from completing their book is lack of clarity on where they're going and where they're at in that process. Because again, circling back to, if you're 80 pages into something and you've been doing it bottoms up, it's probably time for a dose of structure and top-down thinking, instead of just writing another 80 pages and hoping it all comes together somehow, right? So cycling between those perspectives as well is helpful for when you're engaged in the writing process.
Yeah, that's really good. And I definitely like the cycling part. I think that's absolutely key. And you do have to find out what works for you. I wrote a small book. It's called The Guy's Guide to Pocket Knives. I wrote this, it was released last Christmas or a little bit, maybe last October. It's almost a year ago. And this is a little bit different. So my experience was a publishing company actually contacted me. They said, "Hey, Mike, we're looking for somebody to write a book on pocket knives. We've seen your blog. You look like the guy. You've got a passion for this kind of stuff. Would you mind writing this book? And here's kind of how we want it to be." And it was in a little bit of that writing stage of we had sort of an idea of what we wanted to do. But as I began writing, and I'm a little bit of both of the bottoms up and the structured kind of person. I kind of know when to shift, or I think I know when to shift into, structured mode versus, just start writing. And then we began to see that there was a different way a different direction that the book needed to go. Originally, it was just going to be like 100 helpful tips with a pocket knife. And I thought, that's incredibly boring. I'm much more of a storyteller, and I wanted to write out. I really wanted to do an ode to the pocket knife and talk about its history, and then also get into skills and how to use it, and how to set traps with it, and whatever else. And so
that sounds like a more interesting book to me too.
Yeah, it's much more interesting. Yeah, and so it's been a fun little book. It's been a neat process. But as you kind of talked early on about just that, I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this. The process of saying, I've got to write a total of 30,000 words or whatever it happens to be, whatever goal you set for yourself. And just saying, how many words do I have to actually write a day in order to make that happen? For me at the time, I was actually writing this during my lunch break I had a full-time job at the time. And so I had to say, okay, well, I've got to knock out 1,000, 1,100 words, whatever it was, every lunch break for, the next several weeks until I have at least a draft of it. And that having that in front of you as a goal and breaking it down in those small pieces. And, if you don't feel like writing one day, don't write. Focus on the structure. Just do a little structure work. If you do feel like writing, do the writing. But having that goal was really, really important for me, and being able to just, have time to focus. I couldn't do it at home, so I'd go to a coffee shop or something like that. But
that's good.
It was a
it's
long.
Good.
It's a long.
Whether it's a coffee shop or somewhere else, having your spot, quote unquote. And sorry, finish your thought if you want. But then I thought of something that seems relevant to add here.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it occurs to me that one of the hardest parts of the book writing process is the earliest stage, which no doubt people start and then get disillusioned and stop. And that's why you hear stats like 70% of Americans have thought of writing a book, but less than 1% actually do.
Right.
Well, what happens to that 69%? Maybe they started, or maybe they didn't know where to start, or something wasn't clear and therefore they didn't take action. But what happens when you start is you start to build momentum. And especially I love the idea of, writing on your lunch break, because you have a consistent time and likely place carved out. And then it's just about showing up, and some days are going to be better than others. But once you get momentum, I believe your subconscious works while you're not writing, such that you can sit down at your next session and you get into a flow state quicker, or you already know kind of what you want to say, and therefore you're priming the pump creatively by having consistency.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And what I found for me was that having that block of time that's, I can't go beyond it. Like I have to get back to work. That really created a good kind of pressure to actually accomplish things within that certain block of time. And so I would say, okay, I've got to use this time for something. Well, I don't feel like writing right now, so let me do a little structure work, or let me do some research. There was something that I could do that would still be productive. So having those time constraints are very helpful. There's another point I was going to make.
It just occurred to me that one of the concepts I wrote about in my book is called the threshold theory and the power hour. Or I might have even flubbed my own title there, but the power hour concept was born when I was in university. I had a 1 hour break Monday, Wednesday, and Friday between classes. And I would literally go to the computer lab, log into what was then Elance, look at all the open projects that I had contractors work on, and make whatever creative contribution or decision I needed to.
Yeah.
And just out of necessity and efficiency, I'd accomplish more in that 45, 50 minutes then I could have spent 2-3 hours on it, right?
Yeah.
But just knowing, okay, I've got my hour, go in, log in, look at this, make decision, reply, next. Look at this, make decision, reply, next. And then moving the ball forward, which goes back to delegation and leverage, the accomplishments that were taking place far exceeded the personal time that I spent and had allocated.
Yep.
Which I guess ties into what you're saying in the sense and what we were discussing, that if you've got 45 minutes to write, great, utilize that. Know that in the other 20 some hours of the day, your subconscious is working, and ideally you get into that rhythm, and that's where you want to be. It's a much better place to be than starting or thinking about starting and having ambiguity around it.
Yeah, that's good. And actually what you said reminded me of what I was thinking a second ago. And that is that a lot of times when you have that block of time where where it's defined, you can't always wrap up a sentence just right. You can't finish a paragraph just right. And that's actually, I found out later, that's actually a good technique for writers, is that you just sort of leave, end in the middle of a sentence or end in the middle of a paragraph, and you haven't quite finished your thought. And that does keep the subconscious working. And so you come back and you just pick up where you left off a lot of times. And it doesn't feel like you're starting on a whole nother section, and, you got to. So once you get into that flow state where you're writing, it does come much easier. And sometimes it's just you need that extra start there. And just picking up, having that space where you kind of left off and just picking up from that thought just gets you kind of kick-started.
I think you nailed another important aspect of writing there, Mike, in the sense that Ernest Hemingway said, I would always write until I knew what was going to happen next and then stop. And that way I could be sure of going on the next day. So, if you finish your writing time and you finish the chapter and you don't know really what you want to do next, then it can create a false blockade where you don't exactly know what you're going to do. But if you get to, say, halfway through a chapter and you pretty much know what else you want to say, and then you stop, you're going to knock it out, no problem, the next day. Yep. So there's value in leaving that open loop or that breadcrumb trail into the next piece, into the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jessie, this has been a fantastic call, and I just want to wrap up here. And I want to say I really, really do appreciate this. I know the guys are going to get a lot out of this. I feel like for me, this is one of those that I'm going to listen to over and over again because you've given a number of little nuggets there where I'm like, oh, that's so good, or that's good. And stuff I want to have on the forefront of my mind. But I do have one last question for you, and that is, for what you do now, you're helping other entrepreneurs share their message and get their voice out. You're helping people become successful, maybe even more successful than they ever believed that they could. And, what does that mean to you as a man to be able to do what you do today?
That's a great question. I will say that I feel grateful and gratified to be living on purpose, meaning like I am definitely, this is a big part of my life purpose work, the publishing piece, supporting authors, having these long-term, ideally multi-book relationships with authors and entrepreneurs. So, that really helps to offset anytime things aren't going my way or are tough or I've run into issues. Yeah, I think there's something really valuable about, engaging in the entrepreneurial process around something that has true meaning and just feels on purpose for where you're at in your life, because entrepreneurship is going to have highs and lows, tough times and great times. Yeah. But if you're not super passionate, it's way easier to get disillusioned or frustrated or even downright depressed if things aren't going well and you don't even really love what you're doing. So, to answer your question, I truly am very grateful to be able to do this work and to have this opportunity, keeping in mind as well that I kind of created this opportunity and worked very hard to have the role and the opportunities that I enjoy today. So I think there's something valuable there for men and for us as men. If you have a primarily male listenership, then this one's for you guys. A man needs momentum, a man needs purpose, and absent those things, it's sort of at the root of so much anxiety, depression, medication, checking out on drugs or what have you. So, if you can leverage your passion and purpose towards a productive end, there's something very masculine in doing that that's gratifying on a deep level, even before you've got the real success metrics to show for it.
Man, that's just excellent. Excellent answer. Well, sir, I really do appreciate you. I appreciate this conversation. I'm glad to have made the connection with you, and I look forward to touching base with you later on down the road when I write another book. So
awesome.
For the guys who want to get in touch with you, who want to learn more about what you do, how can they do that?
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike, for having me on. Everyone that's listened to this point in the Wolf and Iron community, appreciate you. You can find out more about our publishing work at lifestyleentrepreneurspress.com. And maybe we can link up for anybody that's interested in exploring publishing. lifestyleentrepreneurspress.com/publishing-consult is the way to share about your book, your idea, and flag my team and myself to get in touch and explore that on the publishing side.
That's excellent. Great. All right, guys. Well, let us know your feedback on this episode, any thoughts that you have for Jessie, and we just love to hear your feedback anytime we can. And I know this one's got a lot of different places we can go. If you're new to Wolf and Iron, head over to wolfandiron.com/the group. That'll take you over to our Facebook page where we actually have our Facebook group page where we actually have a community of men that love to discuss these kinds of things. How are you going to radically change your life from where you are now to where you want to be? And once again, Jessie, thank you so much for being on the Wolf and Iron podcast.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Well, there you have it, men. I'd love to know what you thought about the episode. Feel free to reach out to me on any of my social media networks. And look, if you got something out of this, make sure another guy does too. Share the episode and make sure it gets in front of the guys that need to hear it the most. Until next time, keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.